Hi again. Well, it is now 5:05 a.m. and I'm doing as my guides bid me. They said stop procrastinating. This was supposed to be the first video of what this channel is supposed to be about, reincarnation, just an overview, but it turned out to be quite lengthy. Well, I guess if you're getting useful information, then the length is not important, right? Okay, so continuing on about names. We often choose our names, as I said, when we come into a lifetime. The names might tell what we will do in this lifetime or did in others, and our personalities, character traits, or tell the history of the lifetimes that are relevant to this karmic journey. The time period of that or those relevant lifetimes, our skill set, our health, our fears, likes, phobia. I will use my name and then a very loaded male name. Now my name is Winifred. Hello again. Winifred means, I'll break it up, it means win equals peace, and Fred equals friend, and it's Old English. And when you have a name like Winifred, especially nowadays, it's reflecting antiquity and history. Here we go again, history. So it's not very common these days. Now, another, I want to say an iteration, but a name that is similar. It's the same name actually, just that one is anglicized and the other one is Welsh or Celtic, is Gwenfrey. Now Gwen equals blessed, and forgive my pronunciation now. And the other one, Gwen is blessed, purity, white, and Frey is peace, and that name is associated with tranquility and spiritual well-being. Saint Winifred lived in the 7th century, and that's whom I was named after in the 8th century. That's in early Christianity. Christianity started entering Britain with the Romans, during the time with the Romans, and gradually became the religion centuries and centuries later. Now Saint Winifred was a martyr. Legend has it, and there are some historians who believe that maybe she didn't exist. But as I go through the history of the soul, she did exist. Legend has it that she was beheaded and that she lived in the 7th century and brought back to life by monk Bueno. Well, I don't know about that part. That part is legend, but she did live, and she was indeed martyred. Now, associated with her is self-sacrifice and magical healing powers. And as I said, she was a martyr. Now I'm going to give you a history. So my name in 3 of my lifetimes in Roman Britannia was Gwenfrey. And as I said, forgive my pronunciation. And in the 8th century, England again, my name was Winifred. And I am Winifred again. So this now is another fact of reincarnation, that you can choose the same name in more than one lifetime. And that would be for a reason, right? It could be reflecting what you're going to be doing in this lifetime, giving the time period, and these lifetimes would be relevant in this one. So it could be the time period, etc. Now I'm going to give you a brief history of my appearance in this life, and that will explain certain things. Now, as I said, I'm sharing parts of my story that I never would, but I'm now sharing because of my self-soul contract to step out from the shadows and be a testament and living proof so that I can fulfill my Venusian journey and my Neptunian journey, parts of my soul purpose in this lifetime. My mother in this lifetime, the woman, the entity who was my mother in this lifetime, she took my life centuries ago in what we now know as Crimea. I was a teenage girl, and she was a man, an older man, much older man, and she bashed my skull with a big stone. Now, if you will recall, when I started this journey and I started with wondering duty and conscience, and that's what got me started, finding out why I'm so obsessed with that, or was so obsessed. And I talked about landing in a craft, and the craft crashed, and my skull was cracked. And I said that my fontanelle was open until just not so long ago, really. Well, lo and behold again, my head, my skull was cracked. And she should be my mother. So, she bashed my skull and killed me in one lifetime. But she gave life to me. She facilitated my return to this earthly plane in this particular journey. And so, in a way, she expiated. That was the agreement and the expiation. Now, she was due to travel to England. Ticket was bought and everything like that when she found out that she was pregnant with me. And she thought about aborting me. And now, what I'm going to say is not giving my opinion one way or another on abortion. I think that is a personal thing, and if you read my book, Another World Through the Eyes of the Soul, I explain through the eyes of the soul how it sees the issue of abortion. Okay? I'm just stating facts here. I'm not giving any opinion. Now, she thought about that abortion, but my dad said no. And as both of them told me, my dad said to her, let that bus go by. Another one will come. You might be aborting someone, a child, who will help many people in this world. What my dad meant by a bus, and he always said that to us, if you happen to be in a relationship and that person decides to go, let them go. Let that bus go. Another one will come. So that's what he meant. She was going to England, but he said another chance will come, and every day she would say, she thanks God she ended up in Canada and not England. So am I. In any case, continuing the story, she was a very headstrong woman, not given to listening. She always said she was born with a stone in her ear. But she did listen this time. And here I am. My birth saved my grandmother's life. And that is why my grandmother and I had an unshakable bond. And then it goes back to other lifetimes, which I won't discuss at this time. I have helped thousands of people over the past 35 years, and it's been my greatest pleasure to do so. The old and the young, and the in-between, from little babies to very elderly. And it's been my greatest joy to do so, as I said. And I'm very humbled that I was able to help as many as I could. I was my parents' rock in their later years. And I'm humbled by that. It was indeed my father who named me. That is a story in itself, but not one for now. My middle name is Carol. Now, as far as I knew or thought about, I thought, well, you only choose your first name. Middle names don't really matter. I mean, it matters in the material world, in this earthly plane, but in terms of one choosing one's name in the spirit world before one comes back for special reasons, I thought it didn't matter. But my little voice said, the collective said, look up your middle name. My middle name is Carol, by the way. And I hesitated because I'm saying it's not important. I'm looking it up. That's what I'm saying. Sometimes I am a little stubborn. I shouldn't be, but I am. And they said, look it up. That's what they're telling me. And I just couldn't write anything else. I had to look it up. My pen just wouldn't write. Just write pure nonsense. So I did look it up. Well, always listen to your guides. My middle name, Carol. By the way, my father gave me that middle name as well. And he gave me that middle name as tipping his hat to his brother who lived in England. And his name was Carol, spelled with a Y and not O, as Carol. And the meaning of Carol is freedom, free and independent, dance and music. That's me. It's an old English name, and it's woven its way into many cultures because we have Christmas carols, right? Festivities. And the festive dances, carols in the Middle Ages. Well, it showed me that our middle names are important as well. Now I see why they did insist, because those words are an apt and perfect description of me. Indeed, I am a friend of peace, as you can tell from my videos and writings. I often go out of my way to help others, sometimes to my detriment. Part of my self-soul contract was to be mindful of that. And by the way, I am a rescue soul. Many of us are rescue souls. People come to us just out of the blue like that for help, or even when we're not asked. And if we can lend a helping hand, we lend that helping hand. And we don't look for anything in return. It's just in our nature to help. Now, part of my self-soul contract was to be mindful of overextending myself I needed to establish borders in my work, lest I became a psychic sponge. In other words, burnt out, just having absorbed everybody's problems, and to my detriment. I didn't do that. But for so many years, I managed to stay clear. But then it's not every day that you're going to be so lucky to escape certain things. And sometimes I am resistant to change. So I kept delaying. Even though I was given the orders years ago, I kept delaying. But I've finally done so now, because it is time for me to fulfill that self-soul contract and continue on my journey, which I'm doing right now. It's now 5:21 in the morning, and I'm doing the video because I procrastinated too long. When we are independent, stubbornness usually accompanies it. That is good, but sometimes not so good. It should be in the right measure. That stubbornness should be in the right measure. Every trait has its bad side when it's overdone, so you have to know how to balance it. I cherish my freedom and independence. My more than 57 years of poetry reflect this. My love of the horses, birds, and fish reflect that love for independence. My preference as a child to be in the country, in the hills with my grandmother. And my great-grandmother was alive at that time in her 90s, still walking around. And my grandfather, where I ran wild and free, without the structure of life in the city, encumbered with hats. This was back in the early 60s. Encumbered with hats and gloves. Set time for bed. Shoes and socks, prim and proper, this and that. I was free in those hills. Those hills were one of the beacons in the Christmas Day Rebellion in Jamaica. That would be the last and largest in the English-speaking islands in the British Empire. And the final nail in the coffin of slavery as an institution in the British Empire. I do not dance to anyone's tune but my own. My grandmother taught me that. She was an independent woman. My grandmother, my maternal grandmother, and my maternal grandfather, and my maternal great-grandmother, they were nonconformists in those times. They were independent, and they danced to their own tunes. That fierce independence, even as a child, earned me the name Jezebel. When we get to the last item on reincarnation in this video, you will see my love for music expressed. Sometimes, remember now, carol also means music and dance. Sometimes I get goosebumps, shivers, and an indescribable joy, an elation when I listen to music. Some people do, most people don't. I am a former spoken word movement performer. I sang in the school choir, which was an award-winning choir, garnering awards at the Kiwanis Music Festival in Ontario. My shamanic, vocation involves much singing and dance during certain rituals and celebrations. I love folk dances of every kind from all over the world. And I'm not bounded by any masks. That's what I mean to say. I'm not bounded by any masks. You know, sometimes they'll say, well, you're black, you're supposed to love R&B or love this kind of dance. Well, I don't know who told anybody you have to be like that. Your ears and your taste knows no color, really. So I don't subscribe to that. So as I said, I love and enjoy music and dances from all over the world. In my different lifetimes, I have lived on every continent and in different masks, male, female, black, I am black now, kaleidoscope of colors actually, and ethnicities. I've lived in Gujarat. I've been male, as I said, and female, Catholic, Protestant, Hindu. I've been poor and rich, all sorts of mass, educated and uneducated. And so that is perhaps one of the reasons why I love so many different types of music. I guess they would say an eclectic type love for me, my taste, I should say, in music and dance. Now, as I said, I'm not bounded by any masks as to what I enjoy watching or trying. I love watching the fusion of different dances, ballet, and I cannot remember her name, she just passed away. In South Africa, she fused classical ballet with traditional music of South Africa, the traditional dances of South Africa. I'm always singing and dancing in my house. Sometimes it's very quiet and all of a sudden it's very noisy. I'm making the noise, singing and dancing. I love Broadway. I love musicals. My children were exposed to music of all genres, and their taste as adults reflect this. My youngest, he's a true ethnomusicologist, poet and composer with his own punk band. He has an in-depth knowledge and understanding of many genres of music. Sometimes they cover their eyes when they see me dancing and singing. They shake their heads. You know, children, no matter how old they are, when they see parents do certain things and they think parents are old, no matter even if the parents are in their 30s, because they think parents should be old and stodgy. I do the twist as well. That sends them cackling. And even now, I still dance. And in my youth, I used to dance from 11 p.m. to 5 a.m. First one on the dance floor and the last one off. Indeed, Carol. Perfect names for who I was and who I would now become. Now, I'm going to just rattle off some of my taste in music. I think it's important. I'm doing this just to illustrate what it is when you know the history of your soul and showing that the masks that we wear in a given lifetime doesn't matter, and why I would enjoy music such as this. I'm going to just give a short list. Which little child, 9-year-old, loves Lawrence Welk? Rogers and Hammerstein and all those great musicals. Folk music from all over the world. Tuvan throat dancing. And Innuktitut throat dancing. Overtones from Sardinia. And of course, folk music in America in the 60s. Bob Dylan, Odetta, Peter, Paul, and Mary. I love classical music of the different eras. Handel in the Baroque period. Joseph Boulogne, otherwise known as Chevalier de Saint-Georges. Mozart and Tchaikovsky, my favorite. I listen to post-punk and punk. Well, I have to listen to it in my house. And punk music we know to be the music of protest and freedom. So you had punk in South Africa, you have Basque punk, and you have, of course, England and the influence that Jamaican ska, Jamaican music has had on that. And you had Soviet post-punk with Victor Tsoi, unfortunately dying so tragically at a young age. And you have jazz, different types of jazz, Ethiopian jazz, Hugh Masekela, and South African jazz, bebop jazz, swing jazz, Afro-Cuban jazz, and gypsy jazz with Django Reinhardt. And you have the griot, or the jellies, in West Africa and Senegal and Guinea. And now Mbalak. You have High Life and Juju with King Sunny Ade. And of course, who can forget Fela and Nicola Ransom Kuti. It's Afro-funk in Nigeria. And then rock and roll. Rock, pop, reggae, ska, rock steady, mento, gospel, spiritual revival, calypso, reggaeton, bossa nova, and all the different flavors in Latin America, and the music, the indigenous music from the Andes, the pan flute, and from all over India, including Bhangra, and the different indigenous groups in Central Asia, and Sufi music, a music dear to my heart, and folk music from all over Europe, and the music of the Aboriginals in Australia. And I could go on. Those are the music I listen to. And if you come to my house, I could probably find a tape, a record, or a CD that I could play for you. I know you can get them on YouTube and elsewhere online. Now, as I said, sorry about the drifting there. As I said, we often choose our names before we enter this earth. They tell stories that have been written, and they foreshadow stories yet to be written. Gwenfrey and Winifred, as you see, are the same names. In three are the same name. In 3 of my lifetimes, I chose those names. This also reflects another trait that was required to fulfill my self-soul contract. And that was to be flexible. Sometimes I can be resistant to change. I chose that name when I reincarnated in the 4th century in Roman Britannia, in what we now know as Suffolk. Now, in that lifetime, I was a healer and the high priestess of sorts, because at that time the Druids were more or less, they had been defeated. But the practices were still ongoing, and I lived by myself. And I did other things other than just healing with herbs and plants. Now, in that lifetime, I entered a relationship with a Roman officer. And, well, that didn't sit too well where I lived. And then there was envy. And, of course, Christianity was creeping in as well, let's use that term, and jealousy, envy. And so one day, when that Roman officer, had to travel north, and that would take maybe a couple of weeks, months, for him to come back, they threw me into a dungeon with straw. And from that lifetime, I developed a phobia, a fear for small, closed spaces. I was hungry, disheveled. For some strange reason, he came back a lot sooner than anyone would have guessed. And that's the way the universe operates sometimes. I guess I was meant to live. And here I am again. In the 8th century, I was again a healer. This time, I was a well-respected healer. Beloved. I lived by myself again. And here I am, Winifred. What am I? I am a healer once again. I don't live by myself. Obviously, I have children. But I am a healer and more. And I don't just heal with herbs and plants. I use a lot of different methods to heal. And those methods have also come from other lifetimes in Egypt and elsewhere when I healed using different methods again, such as crystals, meditation, and of course with the spirits. Now, and of course you've seen Carol, that just tells who I am. Free, independent, music and dance. And I'm going to just show you something that is remarkable. In that lifetime, as went through, I asked an artist to paint a picture for me, and it was to be a picture of my grandmother leading my Roman soldier home. Well, the artist said that it would be done in 2 weeks. In 2 days, she was finished. And I was shocked at what she did. It was not my grandmother that she painted. And the Roman soldier was not being led. He was leading. Now, the book I wrote, Prophecy of the Homecoming of My Roman Soldier, was not published yet when I asked her to do it. She didn't know anything about the story, but this is what she did. Now take a look at this picture. That's the Roman soldier. And when I go back into the energies, that was what when Fairy looked like. And that's her white stallion. And that seems like the Roman soldier is leading her home. The description that I had of myself then, auburn hair, voluminous auburn hair, my height, tall, to the point one would say of being statuesque, and my Roman soldier, medium stature, more like a swarthy complexion, and my stallion is white. And this picture, I'll hold it up once again. This looks like a damsel in distress. Someone who's being led home. She might not look disheveled, but she looks like a damsel in distress being led home on her horse. Remarkable indeed. And this is how the universe works. This is how our guides work. That's not what I asked for, but that was even better than what I asked for. I didn't get my grandmother on her horse Pringle, leading the Roman soldier home. I got me on my white stallion back in Roman Britannia. The marvels of the universe and our guides. Now, I'm going to go to that very loaded name. Now, that loaded name, as my guides said I should use, is Roman. Now, Roman is the anglicized version. And in French, you have that name as well. And the meaning of that name in French means like novel, you know. And we say it, and forgive my pronunciation, roman. That name is also it's more common, I believe, in Eastern Europe than it is now in North America. But I think it's more and more people are being named that now. In Russian, it's Raman. And in Russian, it also means novel. Now, I have to say that Russian has a lot of French loanwords, and this is one of them. In Russian, Raman would mean novel as well. Could be romance, affair, or love affair. Now, Alice, I will just say this because it's a history moment again. Alexander Pushkin is the great-grandson of Major General Abram Petrovich Ganibal, who was kidnapped from his home in Africa via the slave market in Izmir, in what is now Turkey. I'm trying to remember the name of Izmir back in those days. And he was given as a gift to later become the godson, like he was given as a gift to Peter the Great. And he would later become his godson. He showed promise, and I guess Peter the Great loved him. Now, Pushkin is recognized as the greatest Russian poet. He was also a playwright and a novelist, a polyglot, and they would say the founder of modern Russian literature. He elevated Russian when it comes to literature. And so a lot of loanwords, especially from French, but there were loanwords from other languages too, he introduced into Russian. Of course, we have a lot of English words now because with with technology and what have you. Now, what does that name signify? Rome, Roman, citizen of Rome. So that means that person lived in the time period that the Roman Empire existed. And that, whatever time period and whatever lifetime was spent in that time period is relevant to the lifetime now. In Rome, male or female could have that name because your citizen, male and females, were citizens of Rome. Now, I'm sorry to say now all the time. What else does that name signify? When we think of Roman, we think of Roman soldier. What is a Roman soldier? To be a Roman soldier, you had to have a good reputation. You had to have honor. You could not, for example, if your father was a slave trader, you would not be allowed in the Roman army. You had to be honorable. So in other words, you couldn't have any, let us say, prison records or anything of ill repute. After the death of Mark Antony, Rome, with Augustus the first emperor, became an empire. It was no longer a republic. And when you signed up normally as a Roman soldier, you're giving your time for, I think for some it was about 21 years. Now, when Rome became an empire, Augustus forbade marriage. And he reasoned that you could have split loyalty. If a soldier is married to a woman who might, come from some other place, you could have that split loyalty. Plus, when you had a family, and of course you had to be traveling, then the kids and the family to think about, and you might not want to go to leave your family. So that's how he reasoned it. By the 1st century AD, and if I'm wrong on my dates, forgive me, I think it was under the rule of Flavius, they permitted marriage, or again. Now, Rome by that time had started to defend rather than being offensive, having an offensive army. It was going more into being defending their borders. And so Romanization set in, and meaning that people started to establish relationships, because that's how you Romanize a place, right? You know, having your soldiers marry the women or be in partnership with the women of, you know, that particular place. Now, what are the qualities required for a Roman soldier? You had to have discipline, sacrifice, patience. You couldn't marry at one point. You had to have loyalty and honor. Right? Your word is what your bond. You were a traveler. You had to travel a lot. The period you were conquering or defending borders. And defending borders, sometimes you had to leave where you were defending and go someplace else to defend it. And you were an administrator, because to be in the Roman army, you had to know how to read Latin, read and write Latin. You had to be a good administrator. You cannot build an empire without being a good administrator. You had to be organized. You had to be a strategist, a tactician, creative and innovative. You had to be able to delegate duties, because you cannot do everything. So you have to be able to delegate duties. You had to wear many hats. You had to be sort of like a decathlete if you were an officer commanding a legion. What's a decathlete? A decathlete has his specialty, but he's pretty good, very competent in everything else. And so as a Roman soldier, officer especially, you had to be a skilled horseman, a sailor. You had to know how to handle the chariots, even though you wouldn't necessarily have gladiators were mostly involved in chariot racing. But you as a soldier, sometimes you had to man your chariots, sometimes in battle. Now, in this lifetime, those things are relevant, okay, to the personality and the character. And let me say something about a strategist and a tactician. If you're a strategist, you have to be able to foresee, look into the future to see what is possible, what could arise, and you have to plan accordingly. You have to plan accordingly for all eventualities. But then, what happens when something goes awry and you're faced with something just out of the blue? You have to be able and quick, adroit at adapting to that new scenario. In this lifetime, that person probably wears many hats. That person is good at delegating and is organized, because all those skills, is probably a leader in whatever he or she does, because it could be a she as well, right? Has to be a leader in that. That person is probably very good at whatever they choose, and patience is required for what they will have to face in this lifetime, whatever that is. So, let us now go to Romance medieval, because that Roman also symbolizes this. So Romance medieval means that time period, which would be about, I think, the 12th century, and it depends whether it's the arts, literature, or music. It can be flexible. So 12th to the 15th century for music and literature, but it goes until about the end of the 16th century for literature. Really, for art, it's going there about the end of the 13th century, the 14th century actually, because the Renaissance replaced what they had in Romance medieval, those paintings that were flat without linear perspectives, right? So let's take Britain for example. Literary arts, that was the most productive period in literary arts. I mean, all these men, these courtiers, were competent poets, actually, like Sir Walter Raleigh. He was very competent. And this was a time of courtly love. And you have these poets who would write all these, what would you call it, poems. It's sort of like an unattainable love, chivalry and what have you would have been at this time. And those courtly poems, that courtly love, started in Aquitaine, France, but was influenced by the Crusaders when they came back, and also via the Iberian Peninsula, via the the Muslim dynasties that ruled the Iberian Peninsula. Now, many men, as I said, were competent poets. Philip Sidney, Walter Raleigh, Edmund Spenser, Robert Devereux, the second Earl of Essex, and Elizabeth's last favorite. His stepfather was Elizabeth's favorite from childhood until his death. And of course, there was a competition for who could compose the best poem praising the Queen and profess their love. And this, of course, is just, what would they call it? The word slips me. But there was nothing physical going on there. There were playwrights like Shakespeare and Christopher Marlowe. This was always also the time for the masks, elaborate court productions, right? And performances of singing and dancing, the singing and the words were spoken and done by professional actors, but the performances were done sometimes by the Queen or the King, like in France, because they were wearing masks, and the courtiers, like, the maids of honors, they wore the mask and did the performances. So, and well-known writers would write those masks. And most times it was just most like fabled stories that they would write, fantasies. However, once in a while, those masks would be used to send political messages, and they were not always. Most of the time they were done in the royal courts, but not always. Now, sometimes, in that period, you also had patrons of the art. Now, I'll just say something about Philip Sidney. Philip Sidney was perhaps the most best poet, if you want to say. He brought introduced all the different, how would you put it now? Types of poetry, like the sonnet and other types of verses from Italy. He introduced that. He was the quintessential perfect knight, gentleman, erudite, statesman, polyglot, scholar, soldier, well-traveled, and honorable. In that one man was embodied these qualities and more. He was a lover of horses and had expert knowledge of them. He popularized the various Italian poetic forms. That's what I was trying to say. Should read my notes more. One of the most, if not the, he wrote one of the most, if not the most important work of literary criticism. It's called Defense of Poesy, and poesy is French for poetry. He came up with the idea of Protestantism. Okay, so think about it. You have Pan-Africanism, Pan-Arabism, and here was Pan-Protestantism. But it went out the window with his early death. And the Earl of Essex would become also a master of the sonnet. Roman, in this current lifetime, might, if he lived during that lifetime, he'd probably have influences in this lifetime. He would probably be a writer, might be a writer in this lifetime, or is drawn to the theater and dance for the masks, the stage, the production, whether as a participant, a spectator, or a patron. Someone with that name might enjoy reading poetry, novels, go to poetry readings, might love costumes because the masks appeal to someone with this name, right? Perhaps they should try writing poetry if you have that name, or something. Write something. You might surprise yourself. Let me point out that there's a negative side to our traits and our vocations. If something happens, a traumatic experience in another lifetime, for example, you're a writer, but maybe you might have written something that was against the grain, that might have gotten you in trouble, gotten you killed. You'll probably come to this lifetime or subsequent lifetime and not want to see anything, not try to write anything because you were traumatized. Okay? Now, that person, if anything happened that was traumatic, maybe if they're really averse to writing, then something traumatic probably happened, perhaps in that Roman's medieval lifetime. Didn't have to be in England. It could have been anywhere, but I just gave England as an example. Anywhere in Europe, Italy or France, okay? Now, sports in Roman medieval times. You had jousting, and that was the military game of the knights. It originated in northern Scotland with the Normans. And you had golf, right, which originated, well, we believe it originated in Scotland in the 15th century, I believe, but at the same time they say it could have been in Rome. I forget the name that they used to call it, something similar in Rome. Sorry. And then of course tennis. During that time, Romans medieval time, tennis was also very popular, and that as well originated in northern France with the Normans. Someone with that name might be very drawn. You have jousting. It's coming back now, but not as before. You know what jousting, you have a lance, could be done on foot or on a horse, and you're going in two directions, and I think one has to hit the other. Whoever can make the either fall off the horse, something like that. But anyways, today what might make up for that? You might be drawn to any kind of sports done on a horse. So that could be polo, for example, right? That could be polo. And I'm looking over there because, well, you probably guess why. Okay, so that could be polo, for example. You might enjoy show jumping with horses, or you might not play a sport, but you might be an avid fan of whether it be polo, horse jumping, or whatever it is, like show jumping. Now you have Romance medieval transitioning into Renaissance art. Now Romance medieval, as I said, could be anywhere, not just England, okay? It could be anywhere in Europe. That was the period when most art, okay, before the Renaissance, was very religious. And most of the patrons would have been the church. The church would have been the patron, right? But now, as it transitioned and into Renaissance period, then wealthy merchants, the nobility, and the intellectuals, they would have been the ones to act as patrons. And the themes would no longer be religious. That's one thing. It would shift to like different things that would be happening in society. And paintings would look more real. Sorry, they wouldn't be the flat art that you would see in religious paintings. It's like they would have more realistic proportions. Now, if you lived in that lifetime, okay, and lifetime during that period, could be you could be into religious art, collecting religious icons, or you could have been a Renaissance painter. You could have been a patron of the arts then. So if you weren't an artist or a patron, now you come to this lifetime, you are probably collecting religious paintings or iconography, icons I should say, or you are a patron of the art, any art, right? Or you are a painter. You might be drawn to art galleries and museums, art exhibitions. And I would suggest you could probably get an easel, get a paintbrush or paintbrushes, and paint, sketch pad, and charcoal. Try your hand. You might surprise yourself. Or maybe you already do and you paint as a hobby. Excuse me. Music. You might be drawn to religious music if that is part of your influence, if that part is relevant to your lifetime now. Could be Gregorian chants or the more light-hearted music that they would sing in the masques or in the courts, the royal courts. Now, you might be very religious as well because that was the period of all that conflict, all those conflicts between Protestants and Catholics. You might also shy away from religion in this lifetime, and that's very relevant. Or you decided, well, while you were in the spiritual realm, that you wanted to steer clear of Christianity. And so maybe you're of another faith, or maybe you want to get into spirituality. Explore other avenues. Get other answers. Maybe you want spiritual enlightenment, in other words. Now, the Romantic period, just like the Romance, medieval, same thing applies in art, in literature, and in music. And that period was an answer to the period of enlightenment, which was about, like logic and being rational. It's during the time of the Industrial Revolution, everything is sort of like mechanics. It sort of was a desert devoid of emotions and creativity, culture, and I would say humanity, dare I say that. Imagination and beauty. That period of enlightenment, no, that was a desert. So, the Romantic era came into play. And in music, you have, it was the era of Liszt and Brahms, Giuseppe Verdi, Claude Debussy, Chopin, and of course my favorite, Piotr Tchaikovsky. You had a female. Her name was Fanny. There were two of them but I remember this one, Fanny Mendelssohn Hensel. Sometimes they say she used to publish under her brother's name. He was also a composer. And then, of course, in literature, you had Alexander Pushkin and Nikolai Gogol, John Keats, Jane Austen, Oscar Wilde, John Constable in art, and Theodore Géricault. They were all in art. And believe it or not, Edgar Allan Poe, because of the poetic, how he wrote his prose, the form, that's why he fits, even though we know what kind of stuff he wrote. That's why he actually fits into the Romantic era. So, you might be drawn to any one of those, anything like that, in literature, art, music, and sports back in the Romance medieval era. Now, romance and love affair, at least in Russian, a roman can mean that as well. And I hope I'm correct in saying that. Now, when it comes to that, the days were wild back in those days. And romance medieval, perhaps you were wild in that time, but it has an effect on how you are now. That search for love. It's probably coming from the idealized, the unrealized courtly love that maybe you might have written about, or something like that. But would take you where romance is very important to you, finding what true love is. And sometimes you might feel you found it, but you didn't. And so finding love, from what I'm gathering, is important for the person, anyone with that name. And it's probably something in the past that happened, and then now it's going to affect you in this current lifetime. And then the last item here. So let me just recap. Roman is a very loaded name. It's given us a sample of who that person's personality is. And all those qualities, perhaps some, if not all of those qualities, is a carryover to this lifetime. Very important. Helps that person in their vocation, in their daily lives, in everything that they do. And the skill sets, a lot of skill sets that they could have acquired, whether as a military person, in the arts, writer, poet, playwright, an artist, patron of the art, a sportsman, determination, self-sacrifice, patience, a whole lot of things. That name, Roman, has a place where they could have lived at the periods during which they lived that were relevant and that are relevant to their current lifetime. Now the last item that I have, as I said before, I love music, and sometimes the elation I experience is otherworldly. However, there's one genre of music that touches my soul. And it touches my soul in places that no other genre does. And that music is from the Green Isle, the Emerald Isle, Ireland. Now you know, green is the color for healing. It is the color of your heart, if you're talking about chakras. It is the color that the Archangel Raphael, what we could say, governs, because he governs healing. And there are other angels as well. Now, for decades, I've wondered why. I travel back and I just can't, I don't find a lifetime. I couldn't find a lifetime in Ireland where music could have touched me like that. You know, like maybe a broken heart or something that would make me just stick to that, to Irish music. And 6 weeks ago, I got my answer. About a year ago, a very consequential lifetime that is very relevant to this karmic journey that I have. But it wasn't revealed to me. Many others were, but this one was not revealed to me until a year ago. I'm writing a book on that, yes. How could you not have guessed that? It's consequential enough that it deserves a book by itself. And I guess, as I said, when we are ready to receive certain things that we can manage it, then the higher powers reveal to us different information. Now, this lifetime, as I said, deserves a book unto itself. In this lifetime, my heart was broken into 1,000,000 tiny pieces. And my soul my soul was injured. As a 5-year-old, I bore witness to something no child should, but unfortunately so many children do when they're caught up in wars, adults, and their forever wars and conflicts. I was living in Paris with my mother and my daddy. And on St. Bartholomew's Day in August 1572, in a plot hatched by Catherine de Medici, the king's mother, Catholics massacred between 3,000 and wild, the difference between the lowest and the highest, between 3,000 and 30,000, mostly French Huguenots and other Protestants. Many of the bodies were thrown in La Seine. That's the river that runs through Paris. I was very astute as a 5-year-old, just as I was in this lifetime. I could hear the screams and the banging on our door and the whispers when the doors would open and close. I could hear the whispers and the talking. And I was cuddled up against my mother. And I noticed that her tummy was getting fat. I was curious as to what was happening and terrified because my mother, she made certain she was with me and not my nanny. When I would hear the banging, sometimes I would think, are those bad people, some mauvais gens, are they coming in here? Are those people coming in? And when it was over, my daddy sent my mommy and me away. And as we were traveling in carriage, sometimes they would cover me over. And that's why I found out as I was going through this, I found out why I do not like covers over my head. You never find me putting the covers, whether blanket or sheets over my head when I sleep. It's not happening. Not a chance. No way, no how. It's not happening. When I was 16, I was married. 2 years later, I had a baby girl, daughter. A year after her birth, my husband was injured, didn't put on his leg armor, and he was injured in a war. And he died some weeks later of gangrene. I never left his bedside, even with all that stench from the gangrene. And I was pregnant again. After he passed, I almost died. I was physically and mentally tired. I lost my baby. And my daughter. When they would bring her to me, sometimes I couldn't even stand up to take her. And one day, I guess I was meant to live. It dawned on for her, and at the same time, someone with whom I share the sorrow. I should say that person was with me throughout those weeks. He never left because he loved my husband. He admired my husband. He never left his side. And I suppose we bonded then. And I don't think most people could understand that. I married again. I came back to life, so to speak. And I married again. And this second husband, he died because of war. But by the way, the first husband, he left me penniless. Didn't have anything left. He died in debt. My father, my daddy paid that off. And the second husband, as I said, he died as well in war, because of the war. And he left me with a 2-month-old daughter, a 14-month-old daughter, and an almost 11-year-old son. They took anything he had was taken away, including the birthright of his children. Thank God I had my mother. Thank God. But she was old. She was not keeping well. We had become outcasts. My children and me. We had become outcasts. My children and I had become outcasts. Well, you know, let me just say here, when I went back, some people say back into the energies, when I went back into that lifetime, because I can't travel back, and I wrote what I was getting. And as I was reading it, and I saw I was writing my daddy, and I thought, I don't think they used daddy back then. Was I hitting the right note, so to speak? So I went to confirm, and I researched, and yes, the first time that daddy was used was in that time period, years before I was born, but in the same century. I thought, yes, confirmation again. I was on the right track. I wasn't dreaming or thinking things up. So, yes, daddy. Well, an Irishman came along, and he was my third husband. My mother died before we got married, but I know she felt safe and good, that I was in good hands. That Irishman, he was also a soldier. He hated wars, and he hated what wars did and what you had to do. And he led a battle, and that battle was the deciding battle that ended a multi-years war, and one that would reverberate, and it's reverberating even now. That's one of the reasons I said I will write a book about that lifetime. He loved me. We'd known him for many years. He loved me without reservation. He cared for me. He respected me. He loved my children. And he knew both fathers, both husbands. And he loved horses. all my husbands loved horses. And I changed my religion, actually. I changed it from Protestant back to Catholic. Catholic was what I'd known in my lifetime before, and that lifetime ended 52 years before I was born. In this lifetime which I'm speaking. And I didn't hesitate, because I thought this religion that my daddy had incurred so much karmic debt as I look back at it in this lifetime, erroneously thinking he was protecting. At the end of the day, was all ingratitude. So I didn't think in terms of that, I'm saying, but actually I had no qualms about changing my religion. I was very comfortable because I had known it in more than one lifetime. And this Irish man took me to Ireland. And by the shores, or the banks, whatever you want to call it, of Luderg, in the Shannon Basin, the River Shannon, with my horses, my kitchen garden. I love gardening, and I still garden now. I am a healer, deal with plants and herbs, and I love gardening. And my books, because in that lifetime, from I was a little girl, I lived in a library. I won't tell you what library that was. I had the opportunity to visit a library and to read and gather knowledge. And with those things, and of course, it goes without saying, my children, my heart, I was able to put back together 900,000 pieces of my heart. The broken pieces, I was able to put them back together, and my soul healed. The other 100,000, you'll have to wait to know what happened to those. And that is why Irish music touches my soul where no other music can. And that's it. But I'll tell you this. When I was going to do this video, or these videos, and my guides, they said to me that they know how deeply I feel, and so they had given me, they said, turn the page, because I'd done 7 videos, including, I didn't set out to predict anything, but what I wrote in my poetry written in 2023, and in the articles and the pieces, the essays that I wrote between January and March, and there are many things I said that proved very accurate. In the meantime, I got astounding messages came to pass. Verbatim, astounding, dead on. Spirit working. And they said, you're going to give me because you have never seen me. You've heard me, but you've never seen me. You've never seen the eyes and the face that did those videos. And so they gave me permission. Now, things are still coming to pass. And I've sometimes add them to the bottom of the videos. But I'm going to start posting them on my website because I'm running out of space. And one I would like to tell you that I had actually, and that there's so many that I memorialized on October 7th. And that was the number, the very day that Hamas struck. I memorialized that between 1,000 and 1,200 Israelis, that would be the death count. And I saw the numbers rise. And I thought, oh, we're wrong. Because when they give numbers, they give them. And indeed, 1,100 and I believe 39 people died. Not all of them were killed by Hamas. Some were, I guess, mistaken identity when some were with, I can't remember what that's called, where the army would take out any soldiers that would be in danger of being kidnapped. I think it's David Shield or something like that. And there were soldiers as well. Well, there were 800 civilians, Israelis and some foreigners. That included about 36 children. Now we must remember, I couldn't care less who the perpetrators or victims are. We do not have a right to wage war on the innocent, especially children, whether you're Hamas or the IDF. And there were about 800 of them, and about 300 plus soldiers. So those numbers are pretty accurate. Now what I will do, I will post, and I've gotten other messages, and I did get other messages on the 7th and the 9th of October, and I forgot to mention those in my videos. In any case, I will start posting them on my website. Now, as I said, there are about 120. My guide said, speak a little, and that will be it. There are about 120 conflicts going on according to the UN. And as I said, my guides chose this one because it's providential and it stands as testament and truth to a lot of facts. Living proof. Testament and living proof, to the facts. The truth that is reincarnation and its facts. I guess I'm getting tired. It's been a long night. Almost 7 o'clock in the morning. Well, I hate war with a passion. I don't need to tell you that. Again, you've had enough. You've heard enough. And I guess you couldn't have guessed, right? Why do I hate war so much? Because of what it does to our children. And remember what I said. Whenever I hear of a war, the first thing that I utter is, my God, what about the children? What of the children? Because I've been through much in different lifetimes, through wars, male and female, with fatherless children, exile, torn apart from my son, and his father torn apart from his son, our children torn apart. Now every child belongs to all of us. Every child is not my child, your child, but our child. It is our duty to take care of all of them. It is not our duty to abuse them, to deny them food, water, medicine, clothing, shelter, and fuel. Great powers are usually late or absent to the table of justice. Many of our leaders, when faced with questions about their refusal to actively take steps to stop the genocide, the murder spree, and especially the butcher and unimaginable horrors and barbaric savagery being inflicted upon tens of thousands of children and babies, reply that the situation is complex. This answer is one of moral cowardice. Lies hide in the webs and mazes of complexity, while the truth lies in simplicity. Deliberately starving children, dehydrating them, denying them food, shelter, medicine, so that they die of starvation, dehydration, disease, and hypothermia. I'll tell you what is not complex are these facts. It is not complex to see children drinking water from dirty puddles in streets filled with sewage and rotting corpses. What is not complex is children scooping flour from the dirt fallen from 8 trucks. What is not complex is decapitating little girls and their dolls while they sleep in their beds. What is not complex is mutilating children while playing in Gaza. And in another false flag operation, children playing elsewhere. What is not complex? Sniping children and babies in their heads and abdomens. Deliberately targeting them, that's what that is. What is not complex is sniping mothers, foraging for grass, fodder for their starving children to eat. Baiting civilians with flour and shooting them in their heads and legs in what is a decades old Israeli Defense Force modus operandi. What is not complex is sending people on safe roads, then lay waiting them to pick them off one by one like it is bird hunting season, no different from the German von Trotter in Namibia and his fox hunt. Only difference was that it was not foxes von Trotter was hunting, but the Herrera Namqua. Setting: dogs and elderly, women, babies, children and the disabled, and also on the dead, to bite and feed on them. What is not complex is locking the elderly, women and children in their homes, their houses, and lighting them afire. What is not complex is taking babies from their mothers and leaving them to die and rot in beds covered in rubble. Bulldozer-induced collapsed walls and ceilings, shattered glass, wood, metal, shrapnel, and spent shell. What is not complex is tracking civilians and children with drones, then shooting them, dropping American 2,000-pound bombs on hole-filled tents swamped by mud, and decapitating babies, incinerating them alive, the screams, the horror, the bits and parts of our brothers. My God, my God, my God, what manner of beasts are these? Behold, von Trotter and von Sass live again. What is not complex is testing new weapons to shred children, as if shredding vegetables in a shredder. What is not complex is testing weapons that melt the flesh from bones of children and babies, permanently piercing the flesh of children with tattoos of stone, wood, glass, and metal. What is not complex is using bulldozers to run over children, babies, mothers, the elderly, disabled, and the sick, over and over again, mixing their fresh remains with those of the dead, not yet buried or thrown from cemeteries, as if this is an IDF specialty stew mixed with rubble, metal, wood, and glass. Using those bulldozers, bombing hospitals, lighting them afire with hospital staff and patients inside to cover the crimes of headless bodies with their hands bound behind their backs. Where are the heads? Bodies with eyes wide open because they were buried alive. Bodies still with IV tubes in their veins. Bodies of babies and children, the disabled, the sick. What is not complex is raping to death with rifles, courageous, selfless medic and other medical personnel. What is not complex is raping kidnapped Palestinians with hot metal rods and dogs. Where is PETA? Where are the animal rights groups? You cannot do anything. We know that. But say something about animal cruelty to the dogs used in this barbaric, savage act, and of the wholesale killing of animals in raised vineyards and orchards, deliberately starving zoo animals, sniping of sheep just crossing the street, if we can do something, we do not have to say anything, but just do in the shadows. If we cannot do, then raise our voices and use our pens, displacing civilians over and over again, corralling them as if they're cattle, then culling them in their pens once again as if they're cattle, using Gaza, once the world's largest open-air prison, as Jousting said, now the world's largest graveyard for children and babies, and the world's largest concentration and extermination camp, with the West Bank, the world's largest halfway house, as laboratories and live shows, and the Palestinian people as the guinea pigs and lab rats for weapons of destruction, AI, and other tools of subjugation and surveillance that have replaced the branding irons of slavery and the tattoos of the concentration camps, and then boasting of the profits on the Biden administration amoral and immoral State Department and Pentagon website, and great profits for the state of Israel. What is not complex is building resorts or relaxation centers on Gaza's beaches, meters away from the death and destruction, starving children and babies with sunken, hollow eyes, emaciated bodies, sallow, scaling skins, screams of the children being incinerated with their flesh melting from their bones or being mutilated into bits and parts. Resort centers where IDF butchers of children, psychopaths and sadists enjoy espresso and lattes, steak, ice cream, massages, video games, resorts with AC and for the heat and warmth, while meters away, babies turn black and blue from dying from hypothermia because they are denied shelter from the elements. Yes, R&R, so the butchers, psychopaths and sadists can be in full form for more slaughter of the innocents in the butcher shop, the killing fields and slaughterhouse that Gaza has become. Dystopia. Dystopia indeed. Reality is indeed stranger than fiction. Waving ceasefire deals as a signal. On your mark, get set, go. From director or co-director of this genocide, the man with the forked tongue, the pretend fireman with the water hose, empty water hose, that has never been connected to a fire hydrant, and the replenished gas can to bomb more, cross another red line, and do even more horrific, unimaginable, and unspeakable atrocities that could only be dreamt of and commanded and carried out by von Sass, the Japanese in Unit 731, Hitler and his cohorts and their ilk. There's nothing complex about these actions. There's only black and white, without even a speck of gray. There's no moral equivocation. This is not a judgmental statement. neither one given to perception. These happenings are facts, not subject to interpretation, reason, or excuses. Truth is without any sides. It stands unopposed. No spin, no euphemism, no propaganda can alter this fact, this law of the universe. No spin, no collateral damage, human shields, blame Hamas, right to self-defense, or these things happen in war can alter this. Hamas is not the ones dropping those bombs and incinerating babies while other people watch, and to watch people burning while they're alive. It is not Hamas raping courageous Palestinian medics to death with rifles, but Israeli soldiers. It is not Hamas who's doing all these things. Increasing PR budget, to gaslight, to spin, to play games at the UN, meddle in foreign elections, and bribe corrupt US politicians to force and coerce by any and every means to bamboozle the world, believing, to make them believe that what they see and hear happening in the glaring sun of broad daylight is not genocide, ethnic cleansing, a siege within a siege within a siege within a siege, and the list of crimes go on. No amount of PR can cover this genocide and other crimes that have become out of control wounds that have developed irreversible, uncontrollable gangrene with a stench no deodorizer can or will ever neutralize. We see and we hear. No amount of PR will gaslight most of us to believe that it is sunny and dry while we are standing in the rain. Sorry. We see the big drops, not even big drops, but torrents of rain. We're getting soaked from the crowns of our heads to the soles of our feet. If we were sugar, indeed, we would melt. Excuse me. That vampire, that is revenge. Its bloodlust, the bottomless pit, with its loyal foot soldiers, followers, and spectators, dressed in their suits, uniforms, jeans, t-shirts, and dresses, protected and sanctioned by the halls of power. History's psychopaths and sadists, followers and spectators, the profiteers, scavengers, vultures, hyenas and jackals, eager sellers and eager buyers, proof of the power of the wares of the buyer, wares for the spectators, the patrons and eager buyers, a large showroom for the weapons of destruction and dehumanization, a large life showroom for weapons of oppression and slavery, precise and efficient, some not. A large showroom of patrons and eager buyers, buyers eager to create their own bloodied, knife-point tableaus. Tableaus painted with the bright red blood of the innocents. Tableaus painted with the white, the yellow, the brown, and the green, and all the other colors in between, of pus, of sputum, of feces, of urine, pus, sputum, feces, and urine, and all other bodily fluids. fluids of the last gasps of the innocents, the last gasps of the sting of death. O death, where is thy sting? O grave of rubble, where is thy victory? Landscapes of raised orchards, groves and vineyards, covered with the burnt corpses of animals and birds. Landscapes of mounds of rubble, dotted with exposed limbs, the graves of those buried alive while they slept in their beds. Landscapes of sewage-filled streets and hospital yards, sewage-filled streets and hospital yards, littered with rotting corpses, covered of mothers, the rotting maggot-covered corpses of mothers and babies, of fathers and children, of aunts, uncles, of brothers and sisters, of grandparents and cousins, of neighbors and friends, each with a name and a story. Tableaus of the hundreds of thousands, imprisoned and in limbo between the land of the living and the land of the dead. A large showroom for the eager buyers of the art of destruction, so they too can paint their own tableaus. That vampire that is revenge, whose bloodlust is a bottomless pit, is oversatiated, inebriated. That vampire is sick, so sick of all the blood it is being offered. The bottomless pit that was is no more, for there is a bottom. The earth is coughing up the overfill of so many corpses. In this 21st century, Holocaust, that's what it is. With all of these unspeakable and unimaginable, horrific atrocities committed by our own brothers, who have sunken beyond the depths, the abyss of depravity, barbarism, and inhumanity against their helpless and defenseless brothers, especially against children and babies. They are coddled. These brothers are coddled, aided and abetted by the most powerful. There will never be enough years, generations, or lifetimes to avenge all of this. When we reach this point, hate must give way to love. Unconditional forgiveness, redemptive guilt, and unconditional love. If we have destructive guilt, like most of Europe, especially Germany, we will never learn and will always be inclined to repeat the past by facilitating victims to become perpetrators of the same crimes for which we atone. We risk becoming Holocaust deniers and genocide deniers of the Palestinian people, just like the Holocaust deniers and genocide deniers of the Jews and the Romani in World War II. Unconditional forgiveness, redemptive guilt, and unconditional love will prevent us from falling prey to hate. Hate lives in the same place as love within us. They live side by side, so we can easily slip from one to the other. Knowledge of the truth that is reincarnation and its facts will help us not fall prey to hate. God the Creator, that something that is greater than us, has no chosen few. He loves all of us. He created all of us, each one of us, as spirits, equal, with a free will and a conscience to guide that free will. He gave unto us this vehicle that is reincarnation to help us bring our souls back into equilibrium. That's something that is greater than us. It's not vindictive, selective, or supremacist in ideology and practices. That's something that is greater than us. Never bequeath unto any of us lands. That's something that is greater than us. Would not be so short-sighted, cynical, and cruel, because that's something that is greater than us knows that seas and oceans rise and cover lands. Volcanoes erupt and cover lands with lava and ashes. And earthquakes happen and swallow us, our belongings. No, do not believe anyone who feeds you that Kool-Aid. Do not drink it. That God, that something that is greater than us, gave anyone or any group any parcel of land. We cannot fight on behalf of that something that is greater than us. That something that is greater than us does not need us to fight any battles. That is arrogance. That arrogance is why we are all here on this earth as temporary human beings, eternal spirits experiencing temporary human life. And I'll say this in ending, it's been a long one. We are but tenants on this earth. We did not come on earth to control, to rule, or to have dominion over anyone or anything. We did not come here to have dominion over the fowl of the air, the fish in the sea, or the beasts in the fields, or over each other. So, let us be good tenants. Let us take care of each other. Let us take care of this planet, our temporary home, and all the creatures that dwell thereon. Let us remember always that that's something that is greater than us. The fatherhood of God. Let us remember that we serve, respect, and love that something that is greater than us by taking care of ourselves and of each other, all our brothers. That is the only way to serve, to love and respect. That's something that is greater than us, not to kill each other. That is the brotherhood of man, taking care of ourselves and of each other. So, the fatherhood of God, the brotherhood of man, doing unto others as we would have others, and my guides say, them do unto us. That which I do unto myself, for what? I am my brother's keeper. One divine, universal